4. Thank you. You're super, very, very nice and generous. Thank you. Okay, so I hope everybody had a great weekend. I hope everybody, enter sarcasm, really enjoyed those challenging questions that I put out there. If you have not yet had a chance to take a stab at it, no problem. They're going to remain there, first of all, indefinitely, and I'm not going to post the answer keys just yet, only because I want to give everybody an opportunity to really, sweat over them. I have a couple of classmates who actually sent me their responses. Awesome, thank you. I did see them. I just, unfortunately, amidst the craziness of the day, I haven't had a chance to give it the TLC that it deserves, and I don't want to just, go through it so quickly because it doesn't deserve that. So thanks for your patience, and I really hope to try to get to it as soon as possible, no later than tomorrow. Okay, guys, so here are my pearls of wisdom for you this evening, other than double check your work and don't enter into the wrong meeting. If you are persistent, you will get it. If you are consistent, you will keep it. I like this because, well, we've only tiptoed into Unit 2. And that being Unit 1, it's not that far away, really, in our rearview mirror. It will become, slowly but surely. And it's all about the consistency. Now, the ironic thing is that at the end of this unit, we're going to talk about consistency. Fine, in a different context, but it'll be nice to see how things, come full circle. A couple of very, very quick announcements for you. So first and foremost, our next tutorial has since been posted to the Hive. My bad, I seem to have triple booked myself. I don't know how this happened, but in any event, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience, I've had to just push the tutorial by a couple of days. So the tutorial will be held on Friday. I think it was originally scheduled for Wednesday, but I have to be in 2 other places. I still have to solve that conflict, but it will now be held on Friday, September the 20th at 2 o'clock Eastern time. And what I'm going to be doing in this session is I'm going to be opening up my live browser, and I'm going to walk you through how you can actually physically get online and apply for the exams. So last week we spoke about the differences between the exams. I would say if you feel good and comfortable, there's still no rush, but within the next month, you probably want to go and apply for a couple of different reasons. And we'll talk about those as well on Friday. So again, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go through HRCI. We're going to talk about second chance insurance. We're going to talk about, again, some key dates, things to keep in mind, their current running promotion. I will then give the same courtesy to Sherm, touch on a little bit of like what kind of processes they're involved, what kind of documentation do you want to capture, what is this thing about the testing facilities, and then we'll call it a wrap. So about a 30-minute session. You guys are all invited. Here's your gold invitation to the Coaches Corner sessions, which we discussed last week. In fact, the first one will be held tomorrow night. My dear colleague, Deborah, fantastic if I may say so myself, she's going to be hosting a half-an-hour session on labor relations. This is very, very, very advanced. So again, completely up to you if you wish to join. Please know as well the session will be recorded and you will have access to the recording. So if you're thinking, I really don't need to hear anything about Unit 5 right now, I just started Unit 2, woo, it's going to make me dizzy. But you may be thinking, but I'm going to want to know this. Not a problem. Maybe just make a note to yourself on this date, that being September the 17th. That topic was presented, and maybe you can pull up the recording if you find that of value. Alrighty, guys. So with that being said, let's begin. I'm really excited to power through some more employment discrimination legislation so that we can put this first section of Unit 2 to bed. Now, because we left off on such, I would say, like a challenging note, I think it is totally deserving that we start on an equally challenging note. So I'm actually going to start checking in with your knowledge, your comfort, and your retention. So here's a show what you know question. According to the 4/5 rule, where we left off last, discrimination occurs when? When more than 4/5 of a company's workforce are majority members, when less than 4/5 of the applicants in any minority group are accepted for employment in a job category, when the percentage of minorities in ethnic or gender group. The selection rate with. Okay, we've got lots of responses coming in. Fantastic. Just wait another moment. Maybe this wasn't a fair way to start. Okay. I do see a little bit of a slower response rate coming in, so that to me is a cue that perhaps I should announce the answer. Going once, going twice, 3 times. There ain't no flies on you. D is the correct answer. Amazing. And everybody actually, oh no, nearly almost everybody weighed in with D. So let me just comment, and I'm so sorry I missed one of our classmates. In case you answered with other than D, we had somebody, or maybe more than one person, but anyhow, we had somebody contemplate C as well. The reason why C is not correct is because it's not just necessarily about the surrounding labor force. Because in that case, you're also talking about, I would say, a regional locality. So here we're talking about a process of any type of a selection, whether it is selecting of applicants, whether it is selecting of internal candidates, perhaps for promotion or for any type of training. So it's not necessarily just in the labor force, let alone in the locality of any given geographics. Okay, we have a question coming in as well, and then we're going to segue over to really starting the content. So in advance, guys, take a look at the bottom of page 19. Once we finish this course, will we still have access to view all of these tutorials? Yes, you'll have access to everything for 2 years. Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So let's proceed. So we were talking about the EEOC, and I'll just give you a little bit of a reintroduction if you're not already familiar. The EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They're the ones that as well proceed with not just the calculations of the 4/5 rule and more so, seeing, hey, do we have a problem? But they're also going to be the ones that are doing any type of investigation, whether it is a result of sometimes adverse impact being imminent, and evident, whether somebody has filed a charge. Basically, they want to make sure that every single organization, big, small, or otherwise, is providing equal employment opportunities. You got it, Bobby. So here we have now some of, if I may, the paperwork that the commission is expecting. So here you see, first and foremost, let me just pull out my highlighter. One of the 2 forms that we need to know for the purposes of the exam, there's lots of other forms, is called the EEO-1. Also known as Standard Form 100. Now, if you're thinking, okay, how should I remember the name of this form? It is quite possible from my experience that you may see on the exam either EEO-1 or Standard Form 100. So please know that these are one of the same. This is an annual compliance survey that is required by federal law. So basically, this survey, and of course all the data that it's going to capture, is really that of course, employment data. And it's being categorized by race, ethnicity, gender, per job category. This form is really giving us the basic demographic information in a quick, illustration synopsis of what's going on with that employer. Now, these forms are to be submitted to the EEOC as well as the DOL. So Department of Labor also wants to get their hands on this. But the question is, so who is actually responsible or required, better yet, to submit an EEO-1, aka Standard Form 100? So that would be private employers with 100 or more employees on staff, as well federal contractors that have 50 or more employees on staff. Now, we're going to talk about federal contractors soon because they also have some other requirements. The second form, before I take a look at the comments that have come in, the second form is EEO-5. It does not have another name, so don't worry about stressing, what else this may be referred to as. let's just erase this on the screen. Actually, no, I'm going to change the color of my font. Here we go. So when it comes to EEO5, this is actually just for school systems. And this, in fact, would be school systems with 15 or more employees on staff. So those are, if you will, the employers and the settings that will be required to complete either of these forms. Okay, let's see. Does component 2 fall under this? I have to be honest with you, I need you to refresh my memory. I'm not familiar with component 2. I think you definitely have the upper hand in this. So can I pick your brain? Maybe elaborate for me? I'm being asked, is this like the critical consensus? Yes, but from the employer's perspective. I'm also being asked, component 2 is new for this year and it is a salary requirement. Oh, okay, thank you. So no, because that might have to do with other surveys that perhaps the BLS may want. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics may actually want to know a little bit more about salary requirements, and especially when they are releasing, any type of salary expectations or common like earnings or what have you. But this actually has to do only with equal employment opportunities. Now, I know that, of course, when it comes to salaries, we, being just workers in general, may feel that perhaps an employer is discriminating on the basis of salary, but as it stands right now, the requirements for equal employment opportunity, that being just providing employment opportunities, not the conditions or, if you will, total rewards, that's what's really being captured here. Okay, hold on. Wow, okay, lots of stuff are coming in. Hold on tight. Let's see. I have to scroll up. EEO1 component 2 is requiring us to report all salaries for 2017 and 2018. Oh, it is. Okay, then I think that warrants me to just do a little bit more investigation so that I can answer you a little bit more thoroughly, but it sounds like you know a lot more about this. I'm being asked, it's the second, okay, so we have somebody sharing, it's the second piece of EEO reporting. Okay, so I mean, this brings up some really great food for thought. It is news to me, but thank you, and I am definitely going to do some research and be able to fill in anybody else who has a question mark just as much as I do. So thanks, everybody, and I will definitely follow up with that. Okay, so it looks like you guys are having a bit of a conversation. I'm being asked, what is the point of the survey? The point of the survey is to show that per the Civil Rights Act, the employer not only is maintaining their own records, but also they're being in compliance with the law. So these records are demonstrating that they are being compliant, and frankly, it's basically, for lack of a better word, an affirmative action plan. So it's also showing their proactive measures. I'm being asked, I don't understand what they really want on component 2. The information to me looks the same. Okay, so I'm going to put that under the, and I imagine that's probably part of the dialogue that's going on with you guys, that maybe I guess I'm kind of out of the convo, which I will happily sit on the outside of the circle until I educate myself a little bit more. Okay. Would an auditor do this? Well, this is actually being submitted to the EEOC. So any reports that are submitted to the EEOC, yes, those members of the commission are likely going to audit this to ensure that there is, first of all, it's being illustrated properly, and to that respect as well, that there is in fact I would say, fair representation. The things I learn along the way. Thanks, guys. So speaking of which, here we have affirmative action plans. Now here's something as well to know about affirmative action plans. I think that we understand, but I'll just kind of, regroup what the purpose of an affirmative action plan is. That being is really just to demonstrate that an organization is in no way, shape, or form mindfully, maliciously, intentionally, again, committing any act, if you will, of discrimination, and in other words, providing equal employment opportunities. Okay, but now let's actually get introduced to something a little bit more formal. Here we are seeing under Executive Order 11246, also known and may easily be referred to as Order Number 4, this executive order specifically is prohibiting employment discrimination that may otherwise be committed by federal contractors. And within the category of federal contractors, 2 falls subcontractors. So this is what makes executive order very unique. That being, it's not speaking to every organization, it's speaking to those in particular that are federal contractors or subcontractors. So that's what this order really is all about, to prevent discrimination. Now, this order as well is requiring that all of these federal contractors, and please include subcontractors in that, are required to complete an affirmative action plan. So this is actually, if you will, like a task. Now, who's going to follow up on this? It's going to be another body by the name of the OFCCP. So jot that down if you're not already too familiar and you're thinking, whoa, I want to come back to this. And actually, we are going to come back to this very, very soon. But I first want to actually just take a look at what is required of an affirmative action plan. So let's go through this little grocery list. Here are the ingredients of this recipe. First and foremost, there needs to be a policy. There's a lot of policies that we either partake in, that we develop, or we just are familiar with, right? There will be the, if you will, acceptable conduct, open door policy, if you will. There will be, discrimination policy, harassment policy, health and safety policy. We have tons of policies. This is no different. An affirmative action policy basically is an equal employment opportunity statement. That being, reassuring that the organization, all of its members, are going to make every effort possible to always be non-discriminatory in their decision-making of any kind. In this policy as well, it's going to be assigning responsibility, be it to, if you will, the executive members, a particular member, be it the position or the name. Likely going to be the position because names can kind of come and go. The second thing that's going to be listed in an affirmative action program, or plan better yet, is a workforce analysis. So this is analyzing the company's existing workforce. So just think within the company. It's a list of all the job titles that are ranked from lowest paid to highest and the proportion of employees in each race and gender per job category. The second thing that's going to be done, possibly with the help of external sources, and that's fine, is an availability analysis. So this is where the number of minorities, women and those that are disabled, in the external labor market who will qualify to work for the company will basically be captured numerically. So the availability analysis is always dependent on the immediate labor area. There's a key buzzword for you, immediate labor area. So this area is a geographical range or distance, if I may, that is deemed, air quote, acceptable to travel to or from work, and likewise an acceptable vicinity or range to be recruited. I can't tell you what that range is. If anybody's thinking, well, what's reasonable, 50 miles, 20 miles? It really depends on how saturated any one given area is. Now that you've done the analysis of within, and basically you can compare it, in other words, to what's outside of the organization, now the company can see if they are underutilizing available resources. So you're going to compare the percentage of minorities, women, and those that are disabled in each job group against the number that are available in the labor force. If it is determined that the company is underutilizing any of those groups, they will have determined this through an underutilization analysis. If there is any underutilization that is discovered through that analysis, then the company is going to create some goals as to how to combat this problem, and as well some time frames, timetables, project plans, what have you, to again correct this wrong. As well, in an affirmative action plan, the company is going to list any support programs. So for example, reasonable accommodation, which we're going to talk about today when we talk about the ADA. And then of course, results of the audit. An audit, which is going to be conducted with the commission, the OFCCP, who I still owe you an explanation on, it's coming. It's a threefold audit. First of all, they're going to take a look at history. Maybe the company has a clean record, maybe they don't. Second of all, they're going to audit, very subjective measure, good faith efforts. But it's nice to see, hey, what is the company doing to be diligent and proactive? But then the third audit that is conducted is a little bit more, if you will, quantifiable. It's an impact ratio analysis. So if there's any underrepresentation of minorities, women, those that are disabled, in each job category, this is going to be compared to the percentages in the surrounding labor force. Now, there are going to be differences. I don't think any organization can ever nail it right on the number. Those differences is what's called the JAR, J-A-A-R, the Job Area Acceptance Range, the acceptance range. And that acceptance range is basically plus or minus 20%. So in calculating this impact ratio analysis, if there is, let's say, an underrepresentation of women, which is not uncommon in some jobs. In some jobs, it's not uncommon to have an underrepresentation of men. Okay, be that as it may, it's okay to be plus or minus 20%. Again, there's that healthy buffer zone. But if that measure from the analysis is outside of the job area acceptance range, so it exceeds that plus or minus 20%, that becomes a focus job area. And the company has to act quickly and swiftly to correct it. Let me take a look. A question has just come in. Everybody can read along with me because it was open to everybody in the chat. I'm just reading it silently. Forgive me. Okay, so let me just summarize this. If an organization does not have any individuals with a disability, it may not be the company's fault, for lack of a better word. And forgive me if I'm unscripted. I hope I'm saying everything properly and politely and correctly. What I mean by that is if, let's say, for example, somebody who has a disability may not have applied for the job, or irrespective of the disability, maybe they were not qualified for the job, then that's why I mean, I guess maybe it's by no wrongdoing, if you will, of the organization. Now, that being said, as we're going to discuss today, so I'll kind of gently answer that question. It's a really good one, but I don't want to give away the all the details of what's coming soon. If the organization had a very, I would say, strong, qualified candidate who technically, here's the key buzzword, was otherwise qualified for the job, then yes, the organization by law, the organization by law has a legal, not to mention ethical, requirement to try to accommodate that candidate, because otherwise, so if it wasn't for this disability, they would be qualified. But the question is, when can a company accommodate? And that's where the operative word, reasonable, comes in. Again, very, very subjective. So I'm actually going to give you a real-life example from my retail days of a candidate that was otherwise qualified. How did we handle it? But it is a great question. But again, I imagine you're probably thinking, well, hold on. If I realize I'm underrepresenting, those that are disabled, the question is why? Maybe they didn't apply. Maybe they were not qualified. Maybe to accommodate them wasn't reasonable, unfortunately. So good thought. I'm just going to put a pin in that and never apologize by any means. I feel so bad when people apologize. It breaks my heart. Let's see. I'm being asked, I don't see any reference to JAR in the text. Well, it's very possible. I don't think so, but it's very possible that I just went on a tangent. I'm looking. This is where I wish I could actually press search. Hold on. I'm looking, so let's see. I see underutilization analysis. Check. I'm guessing on page 24. I don't know for certain, but if I may, can we maybe, I just don't want to put the whole lesson on pause too much because it's not jumping out at me. Maybe we can our eyeballs can take a look at this a little bit after, because no, it's not jumping out at me. But I know I must have gotten it from somewhere. Either that or I went on a tangent, and I'll be happy to supply everybody with some supplemental reads. Yeah, if you don't mind, just in case I forget, can I follow up with this at the end of the session? I'm being asked, what does JAR stand for? It stands for Job Area Acceptance Range. There is an acceptable range, and that's what JAR stands for. Okay, so let me just erase this screen, and let me then formally introduce you, as promised, for page 21, to the OFCCP. This is quite the mouthful. It stands for the Office of Federal Contract and Compliance Program. So this is, like I said, it is a mouthful, but everything they do, everything they're about, once again, is all in their name. So if you're thinking, whoa, who are these folks for? And maybe you get them confused with the EEOC, which I think is quite common, at least I know I always did, then just focus on, they're all about making sure that federal contractors comply. Complying with, first of all, Order Number 4, and of course, affirmative action plans, which are mandated by Order Number 4. So personally, if I may, if this helps you, I've always associated the OFCCP with federal contractors, with Order Number 4, with affirmative action plans. They all go hand in hand. So you can definitely, see the symmetry there. And that might help you, especially should you be faced with a question where maybe they're throwing out a lot of different moving parts. So I'm just going to erase this because I realize the slide is a little bit messy. The OFCCP was created actually by Order Number 4. And it is an agency within the Department of Labor. So the OFCCP wants to ensure that federal contractors and subcontractors alike are complying with basically all the rules of their land, which is including, of course, completing affirmative action plans. Now, there's a little twist to affirmative action plans. There are functional affirmative action plans, and I'll talk about that in just a brief second. But whenever an organization may qualify for a functional affirmative action plan, they're going to need actually to get the approval by the OFCCP. So the question then is, what is a functional affirmative action plan? Well, now that you have a really clear idea of what an affirmative action plan is really made up of, it may not apply to larger federal contractors that have many different divisions, or in other words, many different verticals. So think of like little business entities within the business, also known as functions, business functions. So a federal contractor may say, for example, to the OFCCP, yeah, I have no problem doing an affirmative action plan, but to do it for the entire organization, I have a couple of different subsidiaries. I have a lot of different children companies. So it really won't make sense because we have different job categories and we're representing, if you will, different groups in different localities. Like I can't do it all in one, illustration. In which case, the OFCCP will say, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I get it. So let's see if you really qualify by means of our so-called stress test. For an organization, federal contractor that is, to qualify for a functional affirmative action plan, that being an affirmative action plan that is going to be completed per function, business function, this is what needs to be satisfied. First of all, does that function or business unit or subsidiary have a separate managing official? If they do, check. Second of all, does, again, that function have a separate organizational chart or org structure? And then third, does that function operate with a separate cost center? If it really does prove to be a business in and of itself, just under the bigger umbrella of the federal contractor, then yeah, they actually should be completing a functional affirmative action plan. But the OFCCP has a lot of jurisdiction. That being, as we know already, they're going to be ensuring that any qualifying federal contractor is going to be completing Order Number 4, that being satisfying it, As well, they oversee the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act. That is a mouthful. I apologize. As well as the Rehabilitation Act, as well as, in part shared, the ADA. So what this means is, these all may definitely apply to federal contractors, and of course subcontractors alike. And the OFCCP, you can see, is best friends with the EEOC. That's why it's so easy to get all these acronyms confused. So when in doubt, I think I've mentioned this to you before, I can't remember, but when you see an acronym or multiple acronyms, don't just try to go on memory. What I would suggest in your test is, with the scrap paper that you will be provided, write out the acronym, because that might help you. Okay, comment is coming in. At the company I work for, all the production positions, all of them, are standing positions. Yet I have had candidates who wanted to apply that had disabilities yet could not apply because they could not stand for 8 hours at a time. They would need 15-minute breaks every 2 hours. I told them that the only breaks that are scheduled is a 15-minute break and a half-hour lunch break. These are temp to hire positions. Did I answer correctly? I can't answer that. I don't know. I don't know because I don't know what the culture is of the environment. I don't know as well, if I may, what the affordability is, be it time and or money. So that's a really good question. And thank you. I'm going to put that on the shelf with the other thought that I have to try to, paint a picture for you, because I have a similar-ish kind of like example by coincidence. So hold on tight. I promise, we'll try to sink our teeth into this a little bit more. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So question for you. Any underutilization analysis is used to determine if the amount of work performed in an organization is commensurate with the size of the workforce, if the percent of workers available in the labor force exceeds the percent employed in each job group, if raw materials are used efficiently and effectively within the organization, or if employees are taking advantage of company-provided benefits. What do we use an underutilization analysis for? What do we use an underutilization analysis for? Okay, super. Look at all these responses coming in. Okay, really good. Okay, super. When we're talking about an underutilization analysis, sorry, just to answer our classmate's question, and then I'm going to announce the answer. This can be used, frankly, voluntarily, or sometimes it is mandated, as we have been discussing. It can be used in any circumstance, but for the sake of, I guess, the context that we're speaking to all of this, yes, we're talking about an affirmative action plan that is mandated by order number 4, and that really is, yes, for federal contractors. Okay, super. So allow me to announce the correct answer. And as all of you, let me scroll. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. You guys said it yourselves. B is the correct answer. Amazing. I'm sorry for a little bit of a delay. I'm still kind of looking for the jar. I'm just looking for that key buzzword. And to me, I'm playing right now kind of like word search. So I'm like, I don't think I make these things up. Okay. So funnily enough, not funny, funnily kind of, this is, I guess, sometimes how the globe rotates, but amidst all of these amazing efforts that organizations take to ensure that nobody is, being discriminated against and treated poorly, in all of those efforts, it may actually commit reverse discrimination. And that's really actually speaking to manifest imbalance. So there's a fun new word. So where a lot of white males who are deemed to be, if you will, the majority, a lot of white males will feel that amidst all of these efforts not to discriminate, they are actually reversely being discriminated against. And it's interesting because, and you'll see in your text, it was a really good read. It's been some time since maybe I polished up my read on this, but for page 27, there is a case of, first of all, United Steelworkers versus Weber, very, very good, but I really enjoyed the case law of Sharon Taxman versus the Board of Education for the Township of Piscataway. And in synopsis, if I'm remembering correctly, here there was a Board of Education that was saying, unfortunately, we have to do a reduction in force, and of course it, funneled down to each of the school locations, so literally the schools mandated by the board. One particular school, they had done their dismissals, their downsizing, and it came down to needing to remove one more teacher. And there were two people really, I guess, that were, if you will, candidates for the dismissal. Those two remaining teachers, for which they could only choose one, those two remaining teachers, for all other respective purposes, were like identical twins in terms of their seniority, in terms of their performance, their, I would say, educational background, just everything on paper, if you will, was like mirrors of one another. And administration, who was in a tough position to make this decision, they made a little bit more of a racial conscious decision. So there were, again, of these twins, one was a white teacher and one was a black teacher. So they dismissed the white teacher thinking, well, we're going to make a little bit more of, I guess, again, a racial conscious decision in our efforts to uphold our affirmative action plan. Well, in this case, the white teacher actually went and filed suit under reverse discrimination. It's like I'm putting my hands up in the air now that you can see, but I put my hands up in the air and I'm like, I don't know if anybody could ever win, that such a situation. But when is it really acceptable? So if there is any type of imbalance, well, this is when, the company's really trying to say, I'm not reversely discriminating against you, but we have an imbalance and I need to kind of like satisfy, if you will, that. So when and where I can, I will. If anybody's rights are being unnecessarily limited, then that will be an exception. And then as well, if there is a limited time for, if you will, kind of like a temporary situation. Okay, so I have a question saying, let me know where I lost you. I'm not sure. Sorry, I was just kind of on a little rant and I'm not sure where maybe I lost you. Was it with regards to the case that I was speaking of? Okay, so basically, sorry, maybe I was kind of dancing around my thoughts. If you have one position and two candidates, let's say, to fill, and you believe, for the most part, a strong representation, if you will, of all, I'm going to call it walks of life, be it based on gender, race, religion, ethnicity, culture, so forth. You have two perfectly good candidates. You wish you could hire them both, but unfortunately, you don't need both. You don't have the affordability. So in the case that I was describing, and this is actually like a real precedent-setting case that took place, I think, in the mid-90s. Let's say you were to choose the candidate who you would think was more of a racially conscious decision. So you chose, let's say, the woman, or you chose the minority. That's what I mean to say. Well, the individual who maybe wasn't chosen may say, but hold on, I'm totally qualified just as much as the next person. You didn't choose me because I'm majority. So one person would say, hey, that's discrimination. Now, we know discrimination to be against a minority. So it's actually reverse discrimination. Now we're discriminating against majority. So that's really what that case was all about. Well, maybe they're both equally qualified. So in the case where you have two people that are literally like clones of one another, if you have an organization that makes a little bit more of a racially conscious choice, then the majority who was turned away may actually say, but that's reverse discrimination. Again, let's say they're completely identical, same years, same seniority, same background, same everything. That's what the case of Sharon Taxman was all about. How is it determined? So then again, it can be calculated. If it is a group, it could be calculated with the aid of the adverse impact calculation. It can be investigated based on, if you will, the scaling. Maybe there was a rubric as to how that decision was made. So if we're talking about hiring, or if we're talking as well about the reduction in force, it could be a matter if the EEOC has to go and do an investigation and say, you tell me why you let go Sharon Taxman. Well, I'm sure with the spotlight on you and you're sweating in, an investigation room, it might be said, well, because she was white. And frankly, I decided to go with the minority because I thought that would just be more better. That would just be a smarter business decision. Yeah. And sometimes it is based on a group decision. So regardless, though, whether it is an individual or it is a consensus, it's a decision that was made and everybody takes responsibility for it. Let's take a look. Oh, hold on. In this scenario, they all have equal. The decision was based on the fact that there were more minorities in that particular. Okay. Sorry. I guess it looks like you guys are in a dialogue, which is great, just to help one another, and thank you. Okay. Let's continue to power. And we have the ADEA, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. Now listen, don't worry, guys, because I am not going to ask anybody who is protected by this law. I'm not going to ask you how old you are because I'm not willing to admit it. So not to worry. The ADEA can very easily, in my opinion, sorry if I'm making myself vulnerable and you're thinking, no, not at all, but the ADEA can be confused with the ADA. Excuse my poor penmanship. All that differentiates these two is one little itsy letter. And to that respect as well, imagine this. You're in the test. You've got nerves running from head to toe. You're anxious. You've got test anxiety. It is easy to get these acronyms confused because they are so aesthetically similar. Been there, done that. And I'll be honest, the test is expecting us not to read it thoroughly and to get confused. ADEA, ADA, 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 ah! So my advice, once again, when you see an acronym, and if you're thinking, whoa, I'm not going to let this get the better of me, literally just either think it out loud, internally, of course, or write it out and just kind of, regroup and get your bearings. Piece of advice. Been there, done that. Again, this is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. It is protecting employees who are 40 years of age or older. 40 or older, including 40. I have seen in a test, this was so painfully obvious that it hurt that it wasn't obvious. Where I saw in a test, there was a question, something to the effect of, over which age does the ADA protect? 39, 40, 55, or I think it was like 65, something like that. I ruled out 39 because I'm like, that's weird. I'm looking for 40. All I did was see ADEA, boom, I'm looking for 40. But then I was a little bit confused because I'm like 65, it's kind of like retirement age. I'm so confused right now. The question had clearly said, over which age? Over 39 is 40 and older. So sometimes it's in the language. So again, this act, which is going to be, if you will, overseen and policed, for lack of a better word, by the EEOC, is protecting those that are 40 years of age and older from being discriminated in any way, shape, or form in any type of employment context. Hiring, training, promoting, total rewards, you name it. Now, this act is going to apply to private employers with 20 or more employees on staff, as well to government employers, employment agencies, and labor unions, let's just put here unions, with 25 or more employees on staff. What's really key about ERISA is that it really has to link elbows and become best friends with any early retirement program. So ERISA, while we're going to talk about this later in Unit 4, it does have to cooperate. That's really, really key, because if there is an early retirement program that does, if you will, alienate or really coerce people into retirement, and it is not an elective choice, which all early retirement should be, then if it's forcing people to quit, that is actually committing wrong under the ADEA. Okay, question. When I graduate from college in 2 years from now, I'm hopefully with SHRM since I am 50. Sorry, hold on, let me read this again. Sorry. When I graduate from college in 2 years from now, and hopefully with the SHRM since I am 50. Oh, I understand. Yeah, no, listen, but no organization should or can do this to you. Now, I know it's like on paper. Everything looks good on paper. And then when we get to real life, we know that, well, not everything is exactly how we study, but know that you have the ADEA definitely to fall on. Okay. An employer, I ask, requires older workers to perform difficult, degrading, or boring jobs in order to get them to quit may be found guilty of what? Dissuasive practices, negligent management, tolling, or constructive discharge. A little bit of an unfair question, because we haven't really talked about this, but yet we're kind of talking about this indirectly. Doesn't look like you guys need me per se to talk about this, because I think you've already got a handle on this. Okay. I'm just going to wait another moment. Let's just see if anybody else wants to weigh in. Okay, excellent. Keep it coming. Okay, going once, going twice, 3 times. Yes, D is the correct answer. So we haven't really talked about constructive discharge and really how that is like an indirect form of releasing somebody, but obviously manipulating it so that it turns out to be voluntary, and then you don't have to pay them like the severance, I guess, or whatever. But this is actually as well a charge under, in the case of the context of the question, because we're talking about an older worker, could actually be a form of discrimination based on age. So anyways, that's why you pay the big bucks for these really fancy lawyers. Now, I was asked as well, but what is A? So dissuasive practices is a way, if you will, of deterring people or persuading people out of something. So it's just the opposite of enticing, if you will. So it's almost like saying, really, are you sure you want to apply for that job at this point in your career? Are you really up for the challenge of diversifying your skill set and learning a whole new mastery? Can you imagine if, and maybe this is some of you, I hope it's not anybody, can you imagine if, I don't know, maybe you're in your 60s, 70s, what have you, where, as we will study in Unit 3, you might be towards the point where maybe you're about to wrap up that professional chapter of your life, and maybe you're about to enter into retirement. Maybe, maybe not. I'm just putting this out there. But if you were, or envision if you are, and somebody says, really? You want to go for your professional certification? Do you think that's kind of a waste of money? What are you really going to do with it? You've got, what, 2 years left? So that's pretty much what it means. Not cool. Okay. Tolling, yes, if you recall, or let me just jog your memory, when we were talking about the statute of limitations when filing a charge, for example, with the EEOC, tolling is a period of extending that time period, so extending the statute of limitations. So it is currently 180 days. At the judgment of the EEOC, they may allow a charge to be filed that exceeds 180 days. Did I say 20? 180 days, but not to exceed 300. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, sometimes you just need a little tickle. Okay, so I kind of mentioned talking about early retirement programs, and I still owe you a thorough explanation, which no doubt is going to come your way in Unit 4, but any early retirement program is going to be enforced, again, by the EEOC. And the idea is, once again, that it is to entice people if they wish, but there's absolutely no coercive consequences or otherwise to be presented in even a constructed way if somebody opts not to. So, of course, the ERISA has to be coordinated. It has to be coordinated so that it is lawful. Employees need to receive a summary plan description, SPD, as we will discuss as well in Unit 4, of all the benefits that they are going to reap if they opt for this. As well, we have to specify what are the eligibility requirements, be it age, be it years of service, be it, I don't know, various types of categories or stipulations. Whatever it will be, and this will be at the call of the organization, and no doubt that they sought out support. The incentives need to be fair, they need to be sufficient, they need to be attractive, they need to be equally eligible to anybody who is eligible. And then people need to know that this is completely their choice. There's no pressure, there's no obligation. That is what is key. Otherwise, then in this case, this early retirement option will not comply with the ADEA. But like everything else, there's always that exception. So let's take a look at the BFOQs. Here we have before us the lawful legal justifications as to why perhaps we might say, yeah, so you're not a candidate because you are 42. Ouch. Maybe it is for business necessity. Now you might be thinking, what business necessity? The example I come up with, I think of Hollywood. It's funny actually. I think I mentioned to you guys, I don't know. Anybody who's in the Wednesday group, you know, I'm a big fan of Beverly Hills 90210. The reboot, loved it. Anyhow, but back in the 90s when 90210 came out, and I was obsessed in reading all those like teen magazines and what have you, one of the characters, if any of you are familiar, Andrea Zuckerman, she was, if you like, a lot older than not only her fellow actors and actresses, but really she was a lot older than the role that she was playing. And I think it was a little bit dicey whether or not she was going to get the role. So obviously she did get the role, but it is a business necessity, for example, to have, in this case, an actor or an actress who's really portraying, if you will, all of the attributes of, I guess, the role that they're looking to fill. So, if she really could not come off as a 16-year-old, then yeah, for business necessity, which could also be blended with good cause, that's why maybe she, as a very, very skilled actress, maybe would not have gotten the role. And imagine how many people have been turned away in such a capacity. If there is maybe a bona fide seniority system, okay, and this also comes to with any type of employment contract, especially in a unionized setting, and if there is a factor other than age. So a lot of people, generally speaking, from stuff I read, and I'm just, again, generalizing and painting everybody with a brush, but sometimes organizations and people who represent those organizations may have this perception that of a certain age, there's a certain physical capability. And to a certain age, there's a lack of a physical capability. We tend to think the younger are stronger or what have you. Now, I don't know. I watch American Ninja Warrior from time to time. I see some people, men, women, what have you, that, wow, I couldn't even dream of doing what they can do. And I think of my father even. My father, who is 30 plus years older than me, he could take me any day of the week, when it comes to, I don't know, lifting anything for that matter. So as long as there is a factor that has nothing to do with age, and just talking about one's physical stamina is just a random example, but again, the two aren't necessarily equal. Okay. Let's touch on very, very gently, as you see at the bottom of page 32, we're going to talk about some more disability discrimination. I do not predict, from what we've been trending over the last year plus, truthfully, that the next two acts are really going to be tested. So I'm going to go over it pretty quickly, but you have really all the nuts and bolts, if I may, in your text. We have here the Vocational Rehabilitation Act. So this act is really, of course, in place to increase employment for those that are disabled. Now, this act is speaking specifically to government contractors. So for that reason, you can immediately associate that with the OFCCP. And then you can also put in the requirement of affirmative action plans per order number 4. So you can once again make those assimilations. This act, again, because we are talking about those that are disabled, is going to require employers to make reasonable accommodations. And we are slowly but surely getting so close to speaking in more detail about reasonable accommodations for otherwise qualified candidates. Next, we also have the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustments Assistance Act. This applies to all veterans and Vietnam-era veterans. You can see that, too, this act is prohibiting discrimination against anybody who's disabled from servicing, specifically during the Vietnam era. So it is enforced by the OFCCP. Therefore, we're talking to federal contractors, and everything else that we've already established goes along with it, affirmative action plan and so forth. I am really, really anxious to get here. And here lands us, as you can see, on page 34. And it's going to take us for quite a few pages. We talk about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So different from what we saw on the last 2 slides, we're not speaking only to federal contractors. We're talking basically to everybody. Well, not really everybody. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, only applies to those employers with 15 or more employees on staff. But this act says you are not going to discriminate against somebody because they are struggling with a disability. And better yet, it's important as well to identify and to define what is a disability. So a disability is defined as an individual who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity, preventing them as well to care for themselves or perform any type of manual task, any of their senses, if you will, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking. You're going to like this one, Bobby. Standing, lifting, bending, and so forth. So all of this is pretty much in your text. You can tell I'm really just reading to point number 1 in the middle of page 34. But this act is also saying, you know what, if you have a candidate that is otherwise qualified, you need to make reasonable accommodations. I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll probably regret this in about 2 slides, but I got to go with it. Here's my example. So here's my example. And please try to, if or where you need to, anybody, everybody, translate this maybe into an experience that you're familiar with, maybe even something you saw on TV or something you've heard secondhand from somebody else. A long time ago, gosh, in the 90s, 90210 era, when I was a store manager at the Gap, it was hiring season. It was actually just around this time of year, and we were getting ready for a really busy holiday season. So myself, we were like a management team of 6. Myself and another manager, we were tasked, as luck would have it, to do all the hiring. And in reviewing all the resumes, sorry, I should probably go back. We were hiring like about 100 people. Like it was really, really, really busy season, retail, you could imagine. We would review all the resumes and applications alike that would come in, and then we would contact those that were interested in pursuing in like batches, if you will, with a pre-screen. I'll never forget, there's one phone call that I made, and when I made the phone call, I was prompted something I'd never experienced before, and I don't think I have since then, but it was basically like a different phone system, I think, for anybody who had a hearing impairment. So I was a little bit caught off guard. I'd never experienced that, but this is how we learn things. You live and you learn. And so through the aid of this telephone service, I was put in contact with the candidate. Now, our conversation actually went very well, so much so that I got to learn a lot about the candidate, and I wanted to learn more. So we invited this candidate to a group interview, and away we went. Well, the interview, not to mention the group interview setting, satisfied both my colleague and I, who were, if you will, like the panel recruiters in this setting. And we both wanted to proceed with her. We wanted to offer her an opportunity. Yes, she had a partial hearing impairment, But for everything else, she was otherwise qualified. She had customer service experience. She was pleasant. She was respectful. She bounced off very well with the other candidates in that group setting. She had a partial hearing impairment, but she didn't seem to have terrible difficulties, I would say, communicating with others, including myself. So I felt that she was otherwise qualified. When we reached out to her and we made her the offer, we said to her, so first of all, thank you for sharing with us your disability, because she was very forthcoming. We want to hire you. Do you have any requests for accommodations to really make this, if you will, like employment relationship strong and better and conducive for you? And so she had said, I would like you to hire my hearing buddy. And so here I thought, yeah, sure, no problem. But then, oh no, the realities of budget hit me. And I thought twofold. First of all, I don't have the payroll budget to just hire somebody that really can't sell for me, right? We have to have a certain, if you will, like ratio of payroll to revenue. And then second of all, I was thinking about the customers. If I have somebody working on the sales floor, it's not fair to the customers not to know that this person isn't representing the brand. So I had to worry about the image as well. So I explained this to the candidate and I said, but you know what, I'm really open-minded and I will bypass your hearing buddy through our whole process of give me a resume and then I'll pre-screen you. Just, you know what, put me in touch with her. We're going to have a conversation face-to-face. I'm going to give her, you know, a full interview. We're going to bypass. And if she's genuinely qualified, I'll hire her. And I just filled, you know, like my time to fill just decreased and it was amazing. Turns out that the hearing buddy was genuinely qualified. So slam dunk for me. And so then I asked the two of them together, okay, great, you're both on board, couldn't be happier, win-win for everybody. Any other accommodations that I need to, you know, be mindful of? They said, well, can you schedule us always together? That to me was not reasonable because I couldn't afford it. I said 9 out of 10 times, especially when we're really busy, yes, I can. But when or if we hit a bit of a slow period, I can't guarantee that because I can't pay somebody that frankly I don't need. And if I'm not going to generate any sales of it, come on, that's just business. So that wasn't reasonable because otherwise I would have incurred financial hardship. Everything else was reasonable. And so reasonable is very subjective. What I deem as reasonable and my business allows me to may be different from the next person. But there's an example. So for example, and I'm trying to think, I also worked once upon a time in a bank. Helped me pay through for university. And we didn't experience this, but I'm trying to get this visual. At a bank, as a teller that is, a customer service representative, we all stood on our feet. Yes, our backs hurt and they tried with the ergonomics, but if I were a manager of that bank and if I had an employee who was not able to stand on their feet, be it of, you know, an injury, of a disability, would it be reasonable for me to try to accommodate that? I think so. I'd give them more breaks. And even if it was in smaller intervals, like maybe they just needed a 5-minute rest. So no 1 15-minute, maybe I could spread it out. Again, if the business allows, how can I balance it? And then as well, can I get a stool? So again, to say reasonable or not reasonable, it's very hard to answer that for any situation because of the nature of the business. Again, the culture, if you will. I'd like to say, yeah, I would really bend over backwards and stop at nothing to make anything reasonable. I hope that kind of answers the thought or the question that was waiting so long. So let me take a look. What if lifting is an essential part of the job? So I'll tell you, when I worked at the Gap, lifting was an essential part of the job. In fact, it was a job requirement. It was a job specification listed on the job description, not to mention any posting. You have to be able to lift and carry 40 pounds. If somebody cannot, then the question, and here's the thing, if they cannot and they are a current employee, then can we accommodate that? I.e., do I have somebody else that can basically do it? If they cannot do 40 pounds, then can they do 20? If they're a candidate, then maybe they're not a candidate for that position. Maybe we have another position to consider them for. I'm I have heard that also any sign language involved. Not in my experience. And see, here's the thing. If I needed to hire somebody to do sign language in the example that I gave, that may not have been reasonable, but I would have definitely researched it to exhaust what that cost is. And I probably would have needed to check with my higher ups. But if it was a fortune, considering I was hiring a part-time sales associate on a 6-month contract, probably not reasonable. But actually, I didn't even tell you guys the best part of the story, and then I got to get back to my slides. She ended up being with the company for 7 years. I was there for 10. She was there for 7 of the 10. And we're still in contact now on social media. So it was the best decision for so many reasons. Let's see. I'm confused about why hiring a hearing buddy is a reasonable accommodation if the hearing impaired person wasn't benefiting from that person. No, that was a request by the person who had the hearing impairment. They had asked me, I need you to hire my hearing buddy. So basically this person, if you will, was on her, I guess, payroll. It was her expense. She was getting subsidized by the government. But here I was thinking, I can't bring somebody onto my sales floor that wasn't representing the brand. And they couldn't just, if you will, be by their side, because if I had to think about the customer. So really, I guess technically that person got paid for their service to the hearing impaired candidate. They also got paid for servicing me at the Gap, technically. Okay, but what if they weren't working the same shift? How does that work? So that's what the second thing I wasn't able to guarantee them. I wasn't able to guarantee them always the same shift. That's what wasn't a reasonable accommodation in my story. So if they weren't working the same shift, let's say the hearing buddy was working for the Gap, they got paid by the Gap. But whatever agreement they had with the patient, let's call her, then I guess they weren't paid, if you will, for those services. Oh, no way. I was there in 99. Okay. Anyways, aside from some of the specifics of the payroll, if you will, the general, anyhow, story, if, making reasonable accommodations. Do you guys feel comfortable with that? I do predict this is likely to be a scenario-based question you might get. Again, maybe not on the specifics and you having to worry about, payroll, percent to payroll to sales and so forth, but more so about otherwise qualified candidate and reasonable accommodations. Okay, let me know if it doesn't sit so well. An individual with a handicap, as it is called, don't love that language, but that's what it's called by the law, does not include someone who is an alcoholic or drug abuser, was mistakenly classified as learning disabled, has a mental impairment that is not visible, or has a communicable disease such as AIDS or tuberculosis. Okay. Super. So it looks like the group is a little bit torn. I hope I'm not cutting you off, but I realized, wow, kind of ran out of time as I didn't expect. It's kind of like in my typical fashion, huh? So just to respond to the way you guys are answering, we're going to rule out C and we're going to rule out D. So the ADA, I always get this, yeah, Americans with Disabilities Act. I got confused with the age one myself. The ADA will include, this is ironic, will include those who are suffering from alcoholism because it is seen as a disease. It is seen as a type of disability. It's a little bit of a gray area. But being a drug abuser, as opposed to somebody in rehabilitation, the ADA will not. Okay, so it's not considered, if you will, as somebody who's struggling with a disability. On the other hand, let's consider B. If somebody was mistakenly classified as being learning disabled, when we know that that mistake was made, then they would not qualify. But we don't know that they were mistakenly said to have a learning disability. So as long as a medical practitioner is saying this person has a learning disability, then that would in otherwise qualify them, if you will, under the ADA. Once they are mistakenly classified, then no, they are no longer considered. But It's a little bit subjective. So we're going to rule out B, and A is actually the correct answer. And that's why. It's an incomplete statement, if you will, because it's merged together. We're going to take a look at this in a little bit more detail very soon. And a disease can be considered a disability, or diseases can cause a disability, but it is covered under the ADA. Alcoholism is, rehabilitation for drug use is, but not current drug abuse is not. Gray area, big gray area. We talked about reasonable accommodation. We talked about undue hardship, but we didn't talk about direct threat. So the BFOQ, the exception to the rule, is if somebody is deemed to be a direct threat, and again, we need to have a medical practitioner literally label somebody, I hate to use that word, but really classify an individual as a direct threat, then it doesn't matter what reasonable accommodation at any cost that we may or may not, really put in place. Because a direct threat, by definition, is a significant risk to oneself or others. So much so, the threat cannot be eliminated by any type of reasonable care. So that is the exception. Okay. Oh, Gina. Oh man, I had another story for you. Oh, maybe I'm going to have to piggyback this onto our next lesson, and we're so close. My story is too long, and it's really important for me to tell. So we had some really great conversations, but I guess it kind of, I got a little bit behind. My bad. You know what? Sorry. For your sake, I think I'm going to pause here. Either that, or I'm going to start yapping so much that I'll do you a great, I think, inconvenience, and I'll probably keep you on for like another 15 or 20 minutes, and I don't blame you for not wanting to. Not to mention I have another meeting. But aside from me, I could always postpone that. I think we'll pause here. So we were so close to meeting our goal, but we are, I'm sorry guys, I hope you understand. We're going to resume on page 39, but I am going to piggyback this to the goals of our next lesson. And our next lesson, my goal is to power through all of section 3, which is basically, let me double check, is going to take us to page 76. So 39, please, to 76. And I will do a better job, I guess, to maybe control my yapping and the way in which maybe I respond. But I don't want to deter anybody from, asking questions or contributing. I'll just maybe, I don't know, control my end a little bit better. Thanks. Okay, guys, so I guess technically class is adjourned. And again, we will piggyback page 39 to, I think it's like only 48. It's like 4 slides, but anyways, we'll piggyback that on to section 2. Section 2 is going to be a lot of fun because we're going to talk about now planning all of our human capital. Now that we know how to hire everybody lawfully, we're going to plan. Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you. Amber, Mary, really, join us anytime. I still was not able, I know it's there, but I wasn't able to just quickly eyeball where the terminology jar is. So let me go through this 5,000 more times. Like I said, I'm doing a word search right now. And I know that because I feel rushed, maybe it's why I cannot find it, or at least explain why I cannot find it. So leave this with me if you don't mind, and let me follow up with any type of reference as to where you can learn a little bit more. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Pending. Yeah, sometimes. It's okay. It's all good. Perfect. Alrighty, guys. Well, other than jar, oh, I'm being asked, can you also send over the SHRM versus text comparison? Oh, did I not? I think I said that. I did reply. I'll send it again. I remember specifically because I saw your name. I love your last name. I always like Bo. Anyways, yeah, I'll send it again. That's really weird. Okay. Yes, Bobby. Jar means job area acceptance range. So this is the acceptable range that any underutilization analysis is permissible. That being plus or minus 20%. If an underutilization analysis is found to be outside of that acceptable plus or minus 20%, then that now in other words, creates a focal area. It's like saying, okay, we have something, it's outside of our desirable numbers, you beat the contingency, this is not good, we're putting you under the microscope. And to that respect, it becomes what's called an impact ratio analysis. So they have to understand, why is this happening? Yeah, pleasure. Okay, everybody, my pleasure. Oh my gosh, no thanks necessary. No thanks and no sorries, I feel bad. Okay, guys, I am off to another meeting. I apologize, sorry, I don't mean to rush you guys. Yeah, hope you guys had a good one. Have a great rest of the night. I think Dancing with the Stars is on, so enjoy some downtime, you deserve it, and have another couple of great days until we meet again. Bye, everybody.